I see. I see. No, actually I don't see.
Sony Pixar Animation has always been a little bit of a dark horse in the Western animation industry. As much as they had their hits, such as Arthur Christmas, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, or Hotel Transylvania, I don't think they were ever taken as seriously as powerhouses like Disney, DreamWorks, or Pixar. Their reputation certainly wasn't helped by the inconsistency of their releases' quality, because even if they could boast about being the studio that got Genndy Tartakovsky to work in 3D, that was somewhat overshadowed by the fact they were also the studio to bet big on more questionable films like The Emoji Movie or Sausage Party. With that said, recent years have seen a change in fortune. As Disney and Pixar flounder with disappointing originals, unnecessary live-action reboots, and box office flops, Sony revolutionized and revitalized the entire 3D animation industry with Spider-Verse, a momentum they continued with its sequel, and The Mitchells vs. Machines, even if I have to say I didn't much like that one. With a rediscovered grasp of 2D principles blended in with the polish of the 3D world, each new entry in their filmography has been a visual treat from the moment that their trailer first dropped, and now everyone else is trying to keep up. Which brings us to the modern day, summer 2025, and the release of Sony's latest animated flick. K-pop is not a genre I much care for. Indeed, I might even go so far as to say I hold a level of contempt for it. But as soon as I saw the trailer for K-pop Demon Hunters, I knew I could dig deep and unearth my inner stan. So flashy, so smooth, the songs so catchy. I was there on opening night, metaphorically of course, seeing as this is a Netflix original, with my popcorn, ready to finally get it, and understand why my friends act like these groups are angels from on high.
Oh my god. I get it.
This is one hell of a film. I tend to stray away from talking about things beyond games on this channel, mostly because I don't think I'm enough of a cinephile to really give meaningful critique. But sometimes, you see a movie and just have to talk about it. Spread the gospel far and wide. Considering upcoming events on my end and my usual work ethic of none at all, I have no doubt that this review is going to land well after the hype is blown over, but again, I don't care. I need to talk about this film, and I'm in the very privileged position of having an audience already. So, let's start with the basics. What is K-pop Demon Hunters even about? Well, the clue is in the name. 3 idols named Rumi, Mira, and Zoe make up the K-pop group known as Huntrix, which is the latest incarnation of a demon hunting squad of musicians that goes back centuries. Their predecessors from hundreds of years prior sealed the demon king Guima in some infernal otherworld, separating him and his forces from humankind using a barrier known as the Honmoon, which is powered through the parasocial relationship between the demon hunters and their fans. In the past, that may well have been through their legendary status of nomadic warriors of Song and Blade that protected the innocent, but in the modern day, could there be any better way of making your group and their divinely charged music known to the world and strengthen the Honmoon in the process, especially in a post-Hallyu world, than reinvent yourself as a hot new K-pop girl group? It's going great, and Huntrix have so thoroughly entranced the world with their music that the Honmoon has nearly been perfected, which would seal off demonkind forever. So King Guima uses a desperate Hail Mary to weaken and defeat our heroines. Send up a set of 5 Zosung, disguised as a boy band known as the Saza Boys, to steal Huntrix's fans, consume their souls, and destroy the Honmoon. How very clever. I won't go any further than that, because we begin into spoilers, but suffice to say that the plot is a very clever way to fuse the two, otherwise completely disparate plotlines together. I don't know much about K-pop culture, but I do know that the main aim for any group, or at least the media conglomerates that produce them, is to mobilize and maintain an army of zealots who would fight tooth and nail to protect the honor of their chosen bias. In other words, you've got to steal their hearts and souls, just as these demons do. And it gives Rumi, Mira, and Zoe a reason to fight the Sazar boys beyond their lifelong duty. They may be demon hunters and therefore it is their job, but they're artists as well, goddammit, and they don't want to lose their fans to a set of soulless husks acting as a vanguard and public face to an unspeakable evil of immense size. They've built up their fan base through hard work and determination, whereas these demonic floozies are barging in and stealing them through a carefully manufactured guise of perfection and charm magic. Can't see how there'd be any real-world parallels there. As much as this is obviously a film made by creatives that adore and even revere these groups, they were still level-headed enough to use the story, and indeed the parable that sits at the centre of the film, to criticise the industry in a way that doesn't feel preachy or bitter, but still gives the film a little bit of a kick that lets it stand beyond the simplistic central message and kick-ass visuals. Though don't take me saying that the central message is simple, as me saying it's bad or redundant. The whole film is based on the harm of keeping secrets from those you love, and the ramifications that can have both on your relationships with them and the internal harm that can cause. It's a lesson that needs to be understood and learned by both protagonist and antagonist, and it gives them an easy chemistry that makes all of their actions feel entirely understandable, even when it isn't exactly logical. It's also a lesson that feels entirely at home with the source material, because Huntrix obviously can't tell the world that they are actually their last line of defense against demonic incursions, but also because, once again returning to real-world analogies, a lot of K-pop stars end up having to develop personas, a sealed barrier between them and the public, to be able to handle the intense parasocial relationship they enjoy with literally millions or even billions of their stans. Of course, having your main moral lesson be don't hide your problems is the right choice for making a film set in this world and focusing on these characters. Makes it all the more impressive that all of this can be mined from the film when it really isn't that complicated a screenplay. For all that I was just talking about, this is still very much a kids' movie, and everything is written in exactly the way you'd expect it to be based on that. If you notice that it's about to pull out a trope, the outcome will not surprise you most of the time because it will be written and resolved as you'd expect it to be, whether that be the conflict, humour, or romance. Outside of a central plot point that isn't revealed in the trailer, which I won't discuss here but is a catalyst for some of the best stuff in the movie, the only surprise you should expect if you watch that trailer is that the film is a lot more focused on specific characters than you'd expect. I'll dive into this a little more when I really cover the flaws of the movie at the end of this review, but I assumed from that trailer that Rumi, Mira, and Zoe would all have roughly equal importance, and the same for the Sazar boys, but that is not the case. Now, I don't think it's a real problem that the movie is simple. Of course it should be simple, seeing as it is made for children. Do not mistake that for a complaint. I actually enjoyed that this was an easy ride where I could just sit back and let the music and visuals and jokes all wash over me, and it was a really nice audio-visual experience. I'm more trying to emphasise how well it handles these common tropes so that, despite how common many of them are and how straight they play most of them, the overall result of it all never feels forced or repetitive. This is a very easily understood movie, and with how it has decided to structure itself, it would be so easy for important characters to feel underbaked, or like they lack personality, but that is never the case. At least when the character is supposed to have one. A big contributor to that is the fact that this is a modern Sony Pictures Animation feature, and despite the lack of a theatrical release, it is still animated to the standard you would now expect of them. K-Pop Demon Hunters is a visual treat at all times and in every way. Whether it be an introductory fight scene, a musical number in front of thousands of adoring fans, or a slow walk through the park, the movie always looks fantastic and almost hypnotic with how it ebbs and flows from one animation to the next. It'd be wrong to say that this looks less impressive than the Spider-Verse films or Mitchells vs. Machines, and twice so to say that it's less exaggerated or cartoony but it is noticeably smoother. Or restrained. Instead of the clashing styles of the Infinite Multiverse or the doodles of Katie Mitchell, the movie focuses on... it's almost hard to describe. It looks effortless, like one long choreographed routine. Everyone moves like they've rehearsed the scene a dozen times and have found the absolute best way to look as cool as humanly, or inhumanly in some cases, possible. Every locale looks right out of a music video, and the camera work is so energetic while still keeping everything in focus and without becoming exhausting. And of course, when it comes to a moment that the characters have actually rehearsed for, the animation hits new peaks. There are a couple of times I actually leant forward in my chair while watching this, usually during a musical number, because the characters and camera would coincide their movements in such a way that it just demanded closer attention. I won't say too much for fear of spoilers, but let's just say that there's a musical number near the end where, based on their choreography alone, I can understand why people would line up to let the Salsa boys consume their souls. I could also talk about the exaggerated facial expressions, but I think it's best to find someone out for that. I just don't know what to say. I've barely finished Blender Guru's donut tutorial. I think it's safe to say that I've got a fair while to go before figuring out how you do this in 3D. And the fact that almost every character does something like this at least a few times, and yet it never feels out of character. I need someone to make a compilation of these because they're the movie's main source of comedy, and they got me every time. It strangely didn't really occur to me before starting KPop Demon Hunters that a film about demon hunting K-pop stars would probably be a musical, but unsurprisingly it is. You're also unlikely to be surprised by the genre of music chosen for most of these songs, of which there are about 8. Now, I know nothing about music theory generally, and even less about K-pop more specifically, so I can't really discuss this major part of the movie in any real depth, but you'll have to take my word for it when I say that most of these are pretty damn good. Not quite good enough to single-handedly make me a K-pop convert, but it has shifted me slightly in that direction. I think I'd put How It's Done and Takedown as my personal favourites, but most of the OST is pretty good. The only one that I have any real negative thoughts on is Soda Pop, which is just a little too poppy. I recognise how ridiculous of a complaint that is for this film in particular, but there is a line, and that's the only one that crossed it for me. I'm not entirely ashamed to admit that some of these songs have weaseled their way into my playlist, so I now get the occasional burst of Twice in between Rammstein and Deadmau5. I can't really add anything more to this section of the review, but I suppose the Spawner playlist has to be the greatest honour of any musical OST, right? Unfortunately, for as much as the music is fantastic, the visuals are stunning, and the screenplay is more than good enough for what it is, KPop Demon Hunters is not a perfect movie. It's not a million miles away from that elusive goal, but I do have 2 complaints. The first one kind of leads into the second, so I'll start by saying that the pacing is a little too quick, especially in the first half. The film is a brisk 99 minutes with the credits included, so even if it is a basic narrative with barely any fluff attached, they had very little time to work with. That leads to a few plot lines that could, and should, be explored further, but the moment that I really noticed it is when I paused the movie right as it felt like it was about to enter the third act, and saw that it had barely reached the halfway mark. That's not because the second half is too slow, because I'd argue it's the better paced half of the film. It's because the first 40 minutes go by at lightning pace. Scene after scene goes by in a flash with no breathing room in between. Once again, it's a testament to the strength of the screenplay that this isn't overwhelming. The dialogue really speeds things along as characters really don't dawdle on anything during this part, so scenes rarely feel like they've been cut short or like connective tissue is missing, but there is a sense that if this was given another 20 minutes to work with, we could have spent that time building up some of the side characters and give them just a little more to do. And so, this is the point that I'm going to give a spoiler warning. It's nothing too serious, just revealing the prominence of certain characters in relation to others, but if you want to watch K-Pop Demon Hunters completely blind, you might want to click off now. But with that warning given, I feel okay with revealing that this is not a film about the heroic Huntrix facing off against the sinister Saza boys. In reality, it's a film about Rumi conflicting with Jinu, with Mira and Zoe there for comic relief and to give Rumi someone to bounce off of. This is not a film about 3 K-pop stars given equal footing. It is a film about the lead artist of a K-pop group, with the other members being given supporting roles. The antagonists are even thinner, although I would argue it's less egregious in their case. The only member of the Saza boys to have any personality or individual stake in the story is Jinu, with the other 4 being completely mindless when not in their idol persona. I've seen some people act like that's a flaw of the writing or script, as if it was incidental and somehow went unnoticed in test screenings, but if you pay attention, it's crystal clear that this was an intentional choice, as they're just random demons that Jinu roped into the boy band idea. I just don't think it's as much of a problem as Mira and Zoe not having much to do. The 2 girls have their personalities and are interesting enough, but do absolutely nothing of their own accord. Rumi is always the one to come up with a plan, Rumi is always the one to drive the plot forward, Rumi is the only one to have any real character arc, and anything Mira and Zoe do is done with the intention of getting Rumi to react to it. Mira is introduced as blunt and aggressive, while Zoe is eager and upbeat, and that remains the best way to describe them by the end of the movie, because everything they do development-wise is resolved in the climax. They were never given the focus to grow or develop a personality beyond the list of traits assigned to them in the opening sequence. They are simply there to give Rumi, the assigned star, something to work with, both in Huntrix in-universe and as members of the cast. Rumi has the star power and draw to carry the film by herself, especially when bouncing off Jinu, and her co-stars have enough personality off the bat that it isn't too much of a problem in such a short film, but it's easy to see that a slightly longer runtime could have done wonders to better develop these 2. K-Pop Demon Hunters is a marvel, delivering plenty of thrilling fights, bombastic musical numbers, and emotional moments in a brisk 90 minutes. It manages to do all of that while giving enough intrigue and hooks to invest you in the world and in multiple characters, and it has a satisfying conclusion that wraps up most of the loose threads, while still leaving just enough up in the air to justify a potential sequel, which I better see announced within the next 6 months, because I might go so far as to say that I preferred this over the Spider-Verse duology. If this franchise doesn't get at least something more in the future, I'm going to be devastated. It does have a few flaws, but I think that was inevitable with so little time to use. I reckon that any attempts to address those flaws without being given another 15 or 20 minutes to do so would have ended up diverting resources from the moments that do land, and diluting the many strengths that the movie does have. My verdict is very simple. Please watch this movie legitimately. It's on Netflix, the one streaming service I can bet decent money on most people having. It's short enough to watch on a long train journey, it'll be entertaining enough for the whole family to enjoy, and coming from someone who would have described themselves as disliking K-pop before watching this, the musical numbers are maybe the best part of the whole experience. I need it to do well, because that's the best way for a sequel to be greenlit, and God only knows I need more Huntrix in the future. If you're still watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and that I didn't butcher the Korean terminology too badly. I did try to do my research, but I struggle to speak my native language, much less yet another foreign one. It was a bit of a rush job this video, but thanks for watching, and ciao.